Welcome to Afros and Audio's Black History Month interview series. My name is Talib Jasir, founder and CEO of Afros and Audio Podcast Festival and the Vanguard Podcast Network. I'm excited to spotlight 29 outstanding indie podcast creatives and professionals who answered the call to be a part of this series. My guest today is L.A. Dunn. Welcome and thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So, your podcast, the Black Girls Eat podcast, brings a unique blend of education and entertainment. What inspired you to focus on this format?
Oh my goodness. First of all, I'm a straight clown. So that's the entertainment part. But the education part came in just after me navigating my own health scare. I was really not feeling well and not getting any answers from the physicians. And then once I met a physician who helped me understand that what was causing me a lot of pain was inflammation. And I kind of heard of inflammation, didn't know what it was. Started looking into what kind of foods can cause inflammation in your body, like meat and dairy. And pretty much, I think I've always been an educator at heart. I've been a third grade teacher. I've been a middle school teacher. I've been a middle school assistant principal. And when I discover new things, I'm always sharing. And I think that the idea to share what I was learning is what inspired the Black Girls Eat. Yes, I wanted to talk to other Black women and families who may be wondering what's going on with them. And I wanted to just be an ambassador for plant based nutrition and whole foods conversations.
No, it's important work for sure. Could you share a memorable moment or episode from your podcast that particularly resonated with your audience?
Well, I just think the name Black Girls Eat, people often say, like, how did you come up with this name, Black Girls Eat? And I share in the old podcast, and even now, anytime anyone asks me, my family's from the South, my husband's family's from the Caribbean. So we know plants, right? But this idea of being like plant focused sound like something for people somewhere else. And I remember shopping with my husband, and I kept saying, well, if I'm not going to eat a lot of meat, how am I going to get protein? When I grew up, the plate was a big space for the meats and then a little space for the rice and a little space for the vegetables. And I was like, how am I going to get protein? And I'm like, I need this thing called quinoa. And we're racing through the supermarket looking for quinoa. And my husband was like, babe, I love you dearly, but it's pronounced quinoa. And I just fell on the floor. I just fell out. I was like, what? I've been to a million gazillion restaurants. I consider myself a little foodie. And I said, I'm going to make a company called Black Girls Eat because I can't be the only Black girl walking around here trying to figure out this new vocabulary, this whole new nomenclature. So that story always makes me laugh. And people that engage with me, they're like, wow, quinoa, really? Yeah, that's how it all started. And so.
That's hilarious. All right. So, as a plant based advocate, how do you navigate the challenge of making healthier food choices appealing and accessible to Black women and families?
Yes, I'm here for the culture. I'm a Black girl from the Bronx with a Black husband and a Black daughter. Like we Black, like with two G's, like for real. And so when I started talking about plant-based nutrition, the attack came like, oh, I'm not giving up meat. I'm not giving up whatever. And the whole point of Black Girls Eat is not to have you give up the things that you love as long as they're working for your body, but it's to explore brand new fruits, grains, and vegetables. I learned that there's over 1,000 vegetables available to us, and we keep eating the top five week after week. Come on, you know what they are, right? The green beans, the collard greens, right? It's like the same foods all the time. And so I want to encourage people to visit the farmer's market and do more than just buy apples, which is what I used to do, right? I'm saying there's so much available to us, like exploring plant-based nutrition actually expands your food vocabulary, right? We can get beyond white rice and brown rice, right? There's farro. And then I met Chef Chiam, who introduced fonio to the United States, which fonio apparently is like the oldest grain like known to man, So I'm excited. I'm a food nerd in that way too. Like I love like the history of food and how things began, and I'm curious about what's available to us. So a lot of times when I'm coaching, I'm talking about what's already in the cabinet, what's already in the fridge, what's already on the block, right? The idea of exploring new fruits, grains, and vegetables is not about breaking your bank account. It's not about eating foods that don't taste good. And it's definitely not about disrespecting who we are as a people, right? And so that's the journey. And I had a workshop and a woman said to me, my husband's not going to go for all this new age sauteed vegetables or whatever it was. And I was like, listen, I already got my own husband. You got to manage yours because I can't. It wasn't a fight, but I do realize that many of the women that I talk to, that's the battle, right? Do I have to make a meal for myself? Do I have to make a meal for the kids? Do I have to make a meal for my man? And it's like, no, what I'm saying is like, add more fruits, grains, and vegetables to your life, right? So if you haven't scrambled eggs, then put that base of spinach in it, right? If you made a tuna sandwich, like let's find some arugula, right? I'm just saying every time you look at your plate, like let's pump up the volume on the vegetables. Yesterday I had a bowl of pasta and I just cut a bunch of tomatoes and a bunch of squash and just kept adding vegetables to this bowl of pasta. And so that's really the philosophy of Black Girls Eat, is that I want you to be plant-based and joyful, not plant-based and hungry, not plant-based and mad. I just want you to just celebrate the fruits, grains, and vegetables in our lives.
Absolutely. I love that. And there's an ecosystem to food culture, right? And it's vast. So, how do you select and approach your guests, such as restaurant owners, chefs, and other food related professionals for your show?
Yeah, so I always wanted the Black Girls Eat podcast. So the first year I started the podcast just before the pandemic, it was just me learning how to do a podcast, or it's just me in my kitchen by myself. And in the second year, I got brave enough to invite guests, right? I think that I always want the platform to be a place for people to announce what they're doing in the food space, right? It is the Black Girls Eat podcast, but it's not about me, right? So the new guests that I meet, like little Felicity, who's in the third grade, who owns her own sea moss company. I think it's important for people to know Felicity, right? Or whether it's, Nick the vegan, who launched an app that allows you, as a man of color, launched an app that allows you to find vegan restaurants in your neighborhood. Like, I think it's important that the podcast bring those people to the community who may not be getting a lot of press or public relations, but I want people to feel like when they tune into Black Girls Eat, they're going to meet people who are doing things, not always people of color, but primarily people of color who are doing things in the food space, whether it's creating food or developing technology, or people who really like to eat and they discovered a whole new world in their town, North Carolina, Chicago, what's going on, what's happening with food trucks. I learned yesterday that there are mobile pantries. I had like no idea. I was at a meeting yesterday, so I want to bring those people on because in the Bronx, right, there is a narrative, right? We definitely are the birthplace of hip hop without question, right? But in the last assessment that someone did at the state level of all 62 counties in New York State, the Bronx came in as number 62 in terms of health and wellness. That's no bueno, right? But the narrative is we're not thinking healthy, living healthy, making changes, and that's not really true. So I definitely want the Black Girls Eat podcast to be a place and a platform for people to come and say, hey, I just launched this vegan restaurant. Hey, I just launched this plant-based meal service. Hey, I'm doing these things in my borough and beyond. So for sure. I think a lot about the people who get a chance to come to the mic to make sure, like in my gut, that they're helping to change the narrative.
Absolutely. And I love your podcast journey that it was progressive. You started out solo and then you created space for guests. And that is almost a natural progression, know it or not, right? So it's like, that's absolutely, awesome. And a lot of it is, and, I can just tell by your reaction there, we as creatives, and especially Black folks who have this mindset of creating space for culture, we do a lot of things intuitively, right? Without the prior knowledge or the official training. So we got to give it up for ourselves in that way, that we are very intuitive in the way in which we progress. And a lot of it is that confidence piece, right? Finding the voice, discovering, okay, that was good, that worked, and I'm still here. So now what can I do? How can I expand it?
Oh man, brother, it is a journey. Like the fact that I'm sitting here and it's not pitch dark. It's like, hey, shout out to the lights behind me because I didn't know anything about that. Lights. And you talk about your tech stack. And I thought about that. And I was like, yeah, I always wanted the Black Girls Eat podcast to be audio and visual. I just couldn't figure it out. And I bought a DSLR camera, $5,000 camera, like, okay, during the pandemic. And then like the wireless microphones and then the lights. And I don't even think I had show notes the first time around. I feel like, just when it comes to being a creative, and I talk about this a lot with influencers, it's like a lot of women, it's just you. It's just you in your kitchen with your laptop. And you have to, like, when I'm working with brands and brands want a partner, it's like my stuff has to show up as good as Chipotle, Procter and Gamble, right? And it's like, what? I'm in my house right now with a dog, a husband, and a 13-year-old. I'm like, quiet on the set. It's insane. And I didn't always, it's funny you talk about evolution. I didn't know anything about influencing. I just knew I was going to share the journey on a blog and share some recipes, and then it eventually becomes like, oh, I need to get this trademark. Oh, I need to get this LLC. Oh, I have to get these other Black Girls Eat Instagram pages down with cease and desist letters, right? Because it's like there's only one Black Girls Eat. And then just evolving in how you create content. It's like the podcast, the blog. What does your Instagram look like? Teaching yourself how to make reels. And, I didn't grow up in a world of like, pick up the camera and tell me what you're doing with yourself. But this is awkward to just be vulnerable and transparent, right? It's like you teach yourself how to just look at the camera and say, there's nothing in my fridge to eat and I'm not having meat. What am I going to do? So yes, it's definitely an evolution. You go from walking to crawling to running in this space, but Black Girls Eat makes me really, really happy. Like I'm really, really happy when people send me pictures of food choices they're making based on something I said or did. That makes me so happy. I'm almost always the only Black girl in the room. Yesterday, I went to a conference with the USDA office and one of our congressmen talking about food in the Bronx in particular. And there's like 3 sister girls in the room. And it makes me happy too, because there's no redundancy. There's only one LA. There's only one Black Girls Eat. I'm from the Bronx and I'm really about it. And I'm really about sharing information in a way that's engaging and approachable with people. A lot of times food is very scientific. And people counting macros. I remember I went to a workshop. This girl rolled up on me and was like, "What you think about oxalate?" But I was like, "Whoa, oxalates? Like, I don't even count calories. I don't know what you're talking about. What I'm talking about is taste the rainbow, right? Tomatoes, oranges, grapes, arugula, spinach, quinoa, farro. I'm just trying to get people to remix their plates in a way that brings them joy. And heart disease, being number one on the list for heart disease ain't cool. Heart disease, diabetes, obesity, right? Inflammation. I do believe you can use food as a weapon in the war against these things. You got to be intentional about it and aggressive about it. But I do believe that. I think that there are people who are really, really sick and what they need is beyond my scope. But I think it's mad people that are like doing okay. They need to just make some different choices. And I'm really glad, like before COVID, I'll shop with you, cook with you. Like I love doing all that kind of stuff. And I love helping people see the possibilities in the life that they already have. I don't need people to overhaul their whole life. I don't need you to stop being Black, brown, Dominican. I just need you to pay attention to what's happening with that plate.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love that because it is about accessibility and awareness. And a lot of times when you grow up, before I moved back to Maryland, I lived off the basically I'm good on any MLK Boulevard. And so when you deal with that, you know what the corner store is looking like and you see these kids coming in who
Yeah.
are 3, 4, 5, 6, and mom says, grab yourself some breakfast, and they come up to the counter with a blow pop and a honey bun and
Come
and
on. Don't forget
and, a,
that Arizona iced
and
tea.
the
You know
Arizona
what I'm
iced
saying?
tea. And in your mind, your alarm bells are going off like, oh God, that's not breakfast. But for a lot of people, it is, right? And it's simply a deliberate act of an attack on us and our own neighborhoods with the food
Absolutely.
choices that are available. We call them hoodies. And so
Absolutely.
it is important to hear someone that's on the same block, right? Or at least represents the
Fact.
same block and saying, I know what
Absolutely.
we got, but
Right.
we don't have to accept that.
Oh my gosh. I want to say 2 things to you about that. One, I was a 3rd grade teacher and I was a grade 6, 7, and 8 teacher, and I was a middle school assistant principal. And I ran programs for high school kids who want to go to college. So I think in my life, I must have met a good 200,000 children, right? When I was in the classroom, the kids would show up with the honey bun and the Arizona iced tea. It's like, no, right? The bodegas in the neighborhood, they need an education. So 2 things is happening. I'm working on a children's book, a children's series, and one of the books is called Miss Avocado, and that's Miss Avocado right there. Miss Avocado, she's a 3rd grade teacher in the Bronx, but it's called Miss Avocado Saves the Bodega, because people stop going in the book. They stop going to the bodega because it doesn't have what we need as we become more aware, right? And Miss Avocado and her adventures gets to turn that around. But in real life, there's a woman who created a TV show called Remix the Bodega, which basically is like flipping a house, except you flip in the store. And it's about getting the healthier options in the front of the store. It's about the store owners understanding what's happening in the community and making those changes. Because every time I walk into the hood, I just went to a store and the first thing I saw was a row of potato chips with rappers' faces on it. I was like, oh my Lord, right? So these are the kind of things where it's like, well, are we talking to the bodega guy? Is he carrying what you're looking for? So like, I live in the Bronx, you could talk to these guys. They absolutely will listen to you, and the guy sees me coming, he's like, I know, Miss LA, we put the thing over here, you know. One of my chef friends though, Chef Adrian Cheatham, she said something really interesting. She lives in Harlem. She said, if you go into a bodega, go all the way in the back, past the sodas, past the beers, past everything, and the last refrigerated area, that's where they keep the lettuce and the tomatoes and stuff that they use for the sandwiches. Oh, did you know that?
Oh yeah, I've
I didn't
seen
know
it.
that. Right? You seen it, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm like, yo, so if you really, really looking for stuff, you got to go in the back of the shop and tell homeboy you're going to be grabbing this produce from here if it's not there. And in all fairness, we have bodegas on the block, and then we got the mini supermarkets, and then you got the mega supermarkets. I go everywhere where there's a sale. Sometimes people like everything's at Whole Foods. The funny thing about places like that, like those kind of stores, I didn't even realize that Whole Foods meant like whole foods, like foods that are not broken down, right, and processed, right? Like even that's an education. When I was an educator, I'm still an educator, but when I was in schools, I would say like the kids would walk past the colleges just to get to the train station. Right? They didn't even know. They lived right next to Fordham University or NYU or Columbia. It was just a way to get to the train station. And so I think about that a lot in the stores. I look for partners. I have a new partner who is developing produce, and their produce is available in Whole Foods. I want to work with them to talk about how do we get your produce more accessible into more neighborhoods. They've got like a vegetable food truck. I'm like, I'm feeling that. That's like a Mr. Softy truck coming on the block with vegetables. Like, oh yes, I'm here for that conversation. So yeah, I'm definitely like anytime on a panel or hosting a workshop or talking to anyone, I'm always thinking about like, where do you live? How do you shop? And how can I make a difference in your life?
Absolutely. It's very, very necessary. And so
Mhm.
I want to talk about this exciting partnership you have with BronxNet coming up. So the move to an audio-visual format in partnership with BronxNet is a significant shift for you. What motivated this change, and how has it influenced the way you produce your podcasts?
Yes. Well, I want to get out the kitchen. That's the first thing. I mean, I appreciate, being in the kitchen. I appreciate the vibe, but I felt like I really want to invite people to come somewhere, right? And so the BronxNet studio is on the campus at Mercy College in New York City in the Bronx. So the fact that the campus is in the Bronx, I graduated from Mercy College, and the fact that there's a state-of-the-art TV studio there was like, whoa. Then I met the folks that lead BronxNet. The BronxNet is a nonprofit. It's been in the Bronx for like 30 years. They have all kind of trainings and television production, animation. They really, really are about the community. And so I ran into the leadership, and they were like, oh, we should do something together, like with Black Girls Eat. And I couldn't figure out what. So during COVID, I took a TV production class virtually with BronxNet. Their deal is if you take our classes, then you have access to our resources, which I just think is like, who knows about that, right? Like, that's crazy. And then last year, I took the class again, like in person with classmates, with a teacher in the studio. Not that I want to be behind the board saying, cut the camera 1 and 2 and all of that, but it was dope to understand like how that works so that I could see how I want to see it in my mind's eye. And so the inspiration to move to BronxNet was, one, they invited me. That's major. Two, they are like a pillar in the Bronx, and I'm just about the borough all day. And three, I felt like, yeah, that's going to be fly. Like in the studio, Miss Avocado on the screens, being able to invite people to a studio to record so that it looks and sounds the way it should, and just always being able to say the Black Girls Eat podcast on BronxNet. I think that even when I go out to like food festivals and events, we can bring camera crew to cover things. I think it'd be good for the brand, it'd be good for me. And I just think the partnership is going to be a really strong one. They've got 1.4 million subscribers in the Bronx. And a lot of people are like, well, that's not a lot of people. I'm like, well, that's a lot of people to me. It's dope to hear what's happening globally because I always want to talk about what's happening around the world, but really, really like digging into like, and did you know this is happening right in your own backyard? So I'm happy to be the plant-based voice for the BX. I'm happy to be the Bronx girl doing good. Like it makes me feel good. And I'm just really, really thankful that they invited me to bring content to the network because they got a lot of shows and they got a lot of people, but they don't have Black Girls Eat.
Word, word. I love that. It says a lot about your content. It says a lot about you and your come from because there's only one LA in this space doing this work. And they see you and you see yourself enough to say, yeah, let's go. I can do that.
Let's
you know,
Yep,
that's
exactly.
important too. We're willing to say, you know what, this makes sense. This is aligned and I've progressed this part. And now expansion is an option and I'm going to take it.
For real. And that's
Yeah.
what it's about. I mean, somebody said, if you're not taking up, room, you're on the edge, you need to take up the space, like do what you got to do. And I always was like that with my students. I'm like that with my own daughter. Like, let's go. This is go time. And it's scary. It's nerve wracking. You got all those different things. You don't really know, but just be authentically about it and it's all going to work out. And that is what has saved me. It's funny. My friend was like, you sound like Remy Ma. You sound like a rapper. I probably would have been, right? I used to be in a singing group in high school, but I should have been like T-Bars from TLC. But I do not deny that my DNA is hip hop all day and that mindset of like when you come to the cipher and grab the mic or you at the booth or Rap City, whatever, I have the same mindset. Like, all right, let's go.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. No, it shows and ain't nothing wrong with it. You know what I'm saying? It's actually what the people want, it gets the people going. So absolutely, I love it. So your newsletter, Recipes and Random Ish, combines food with other interests. How do you balance these diverse topics while maintaining a cohesive theme?
Yes, well, the newsletter is new. That's another scary place. People were like, you don't have a newsletter. I'm like, it's like I don't have a staff either, right? Like you have a staff writing your blog posts and a staff member writing a newsletter, somebody else create Instagram reels, somebody else booking top, folks for the podcast. So I was always like, oh, I can't add another thing. Um, I think that recipes and random ish, it was like I love connecting with people and I want people to understand who I am and what the journey is about. So the recipes, a lot of people ask me, but how do you make roasted squash or how do you make polenta? So I'm like, okay, let me give you these recipes. And the random is just like me selfishly being like, and let me tell you what else is going on for me. Whether it's something I experienced, somebody I met, something I want to share. Like when I told somebody I sang in my group at the Apollo as a guest and they booed the hell out of my group. We were a guest. We wasn't even in the talent show, right? I'll never forget this lady with her umbrella. Don't quit your day job. Get off the stage. Whatever. So I love that stuff. The newsletter is probably about a year old, and I honestly should take a critical look at the journey of the newsletter to say, like, is it bringing value to people? I do get a lot of cool notes though from people, like, oh, I appreciate what you said. But if it's not useful to the audience, then I don't want to do it. Right? So taking a look at it to be like, all right, so the recipes, the click open rate, right? 55% of the newsletters got open. This guy was like, wow, and the rate's like 31. I'm like, oh, great. I had 55, right? So, looking at those things, asking people, if you want to hear from me, I mean, I thought I would do it every Thursday, but I also said, well, it might be Thursday, maybe Friday, depending on what happens with life. Like this idea of showing up consistently is important to me. And I haven't quite figured that out, right? I know people sit down and they write the newsletter for a whole year. They just camp out for 72 hours and write the newsletter, but I don't really vibe like that. I'm sure my management team would be like, we wish you would vibe. You wish you would. So at best, try to write about two or three in advance and then like tweak them. But I'm still in a space where everything is just when it's happening, I start writing. I'm just in that space. So if the audience is willing to be okay with the newsletter showing up Friday, maybe Saturday, okay, then we'll be all right.
Word up, word up. That's great. But all these touch points that lead you right back to Black Girls Eat and Miss Avocado, all of that is is necessary and important. And hopefully that it will grow and you get intentional about contributions to it. So you're not the only one writing and all that sort of thing. And getting a team that really, it's all about people who care about what you're doing, even if you're not necessarily in a space to expand the team in a monetary way. There are people
Right.
out here who are so passionate about this work. They really want to
Yeah.
get the word out. And so those are the people that we want to attract.
I hope so. Can they
Yeah.
call me?
Yeah.
Listen, we can come over, we can cook, we can eat. Like, I'm down. Like, call me, please. And virtually, if you're not in New York City, like, please call me. Our sister girl needs some support. I feel like next year this time we've been a different place. But yeah, there's so much like the children's books, getting up at 5 in the morning to write them. I had secured an animation deal for Miss Avocado. So originally she only had a head. I gotta tell you this story really quickly. I went to a website to look for a logo, and you put your description in of what you're looking for, and like 50, 60 designers, they jump on this contest to get the job. And so everybody kept sending me forks, plates, and spoons, logos that said black girls eat on a plate, logos that said black girls eat with a fork. And I was just like, this is so boring. And at the time, I had these curly extensions in my hair, and the guy said, send me a photo of you. And he sent back Miss Avocado, and I just fell in love, right? So he won the contest. I named him as A period Vocado because when I was a teacher, my name always was L period Dunn, right? So when I was a teacher, the kids were like, what's your first name? So every day I'll be like, oh, it's Lorraine, it's Louisa, it's Lisa. I would change it. And don't you remember being a kid, always wanting to know your teacher's first name? You're always like, you didn't even know they were real people, right? You thought they was like plugged in the wall at school, right? You didn't even, the first time you saw your teacher outside, you're like, oh my God. So that's what Miss Avocado is about. But then like 2 years later, the designer, he's in Romania. He reached out to me. His name is Mr. Branding on Instagram. He reached out to me and said, do you remember me? I created your logo. And I was like, of course. He was like, is there anything you need? And I was like, it would be great for her to get some legs because I want to animate her. And he said, well, my whole life changed. I wasn't feeling well. And I started leaning into vegan, vegetarian lifestyle. And I thought of you. And so he gave me like 75 new images with Miss Avocado and her legs and was like, I'm not charging you. I was like, what? He was like, I just totally believe in what you're doing. Like, I'm not charging. I ended up paying him anyway. But the point is, he was so motivated and inspired, right? And so then I took Miss Avocado and I created a pitch deck for a cartoon series and actually landed an animation deal with a studio. And the partner in the studio is responsible for like Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and the Jolly Green Giant and like all these iconic figures that we grew up with. And I was really, really excited to bring Miss Avocado to life with him. And then the writer's strike happened and everything happened in LA and the whole studio folded. So there was the end of that deal. But I am inspired because I was able to pitch and land a deal based on Miss Avocado, which means I can do it again. So
Oh, absolutely. You can do it again.
there you go. There you
For
go. So
sure.
that's
For
the goal.
sure.
Children's books, animation. It's a whole universe for Miss Avocado. It's not just the recipes, but a lot of really cool things. As an educator, of course, there's a curriculum I want to write, 10 lesson plans. I see kids in schools making quick recipes. I had a workshop with some teenagers on how to cook without using fire, how to make snacks for yourself, things like that. I see that all in the world of Black Girls Eat and Miss Avocado. So,
That's awesome. And what's really cool and something that I like to talk to podcasters about, especially when we are talking to aspiring and new, is that the power of audio is that it can become a cornerstone for so many other things to be built on.
for
And
sure.
you are an example of that, right? It all started with the podcast, right? It all started with this idea and this concept. And now look at you, like, come on.
We out here. We
Yeah.
outside.
Word up, word up. I love it. It's such a great story and you live in it. You're being an example and possibility for others. And I know both of us, that's really important. So that's dope. Congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, it's just fun and entrepreneurial and crazy, but you know what? It's mine, right? So there's that.
Yeah, you don't even know where life is about to go with this, right? And it started with the podcast.
And here
You
we
know?
are.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. We're enterprising people, so let's go. This is how it starts. But you got to start. You got to start. That's the point.
I know this guy told me, slow motion is better than no motion. I said,
Word
all
up.
right,
Yeah,
I
word
hear you,
up.
brother man.
Yep. So you mentioned that your podcast has inspired you to pursue a second master's degree in dietetics. How has your journey in podcasting influenced your academic and professional goals?
Yes, absolutely. I started Black Girls Eat as a woman who just wasn't feeling well. Then I started writing blogs. Then I started meeting other people. Then I started taking online classes in plant based nutrition. And I started all of this learning. And then people started asking me, what's your opinion about this? And what's your opinion about that? And even getting like press opportunities and things like that coming out of the podcast and just in general. But the caveat has been in the last 2 years, we love what you're saying about 4 out of every 5 Black women have high blood pressure. We love what you're saying about plants and fruits and grains and vegetables, but you're not a registered dietitian. So I can't use that. And I'm like, what? Like, really? In this country, there's like over 300 million people, and there's only like just under 2,000 people of color living life as a registered dietetic nutritionist. Like, this is beyond me. We are the population that needs a nutritionist, right? Then I was just incensed. I guess my motivation is I'm angry. I'm just incensed by the whole industry. I'm incensed that as of January 1st, 2024, you can't be a nutritionist in this country without a master's degree. So all the people who study nutrition in the bachelor's degree, like, they can't take the test, right? Unless they now have a master's. So like the disparity is like the gap. Okay, so we find out that we number one in heart disease and obesity and all these other things, and COVID knocked us out more than everybody else because we already had pre-existing things going on. So we already know all the data. We know it's horrible. So now we want to go to school and do something about it. And they're like, yeah, bachelor's is not going to cut it. Really? Yeah, masters now. You got to have a master's degree. Then to get a master's degree in nutrition, you also have to have like 1,200 hours of like on site practice. So just think about the average person who quitting their job to go to school to become a nutritionist. Nobody, right? How are you going to squeeze all of this in as an adult? So I feel like it's a must do. I'm gonna be on the mic talking about nutrition studies, talking about the BIPOC community in nutrition studies. And I want to say shout out to all the BIPOC dietitians that have embraced me, send me notes. When I said I'm gonna go to school, like so many people was like, yes, you got this. I just have to just do it because I want to be credible, right? I feel credible, but now on like I gotta low key be credible in that space, which I don't know. I feel like systemic things people do, right? It's like, oh, you good, but right? It's like, okay, I want to be in the room. And so I don't want any reason for me not to be in the room. So getting the certification and passing the test is gonna like give me access to more rooms. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
hope that
No,
fiery response, I hope it
yeah.
makes sense.
No, it's real though. And to recognize that America is a credential based society and to recognize it as a deterrent, to recognize it as a barrier. And so, and because you know your shit already, right? And if you don't know your shit, then you can source the stuff that you were
Exactly.
talking about. But
Woo.
this is the opportunity, and it's been an opportunity for many years to say it's not because of your skin color, it's not because of my bias, it's because you
Mm-hmm.
don't have the degree. That's all it's about. And again, being made aware of these things supports because you know why it's happening to you. You're not just blindly saying, okay, I guess I get a degree,
Yeah.
that it's deliberate.
Yeah.
But inside of that saying, well, okay, if that's what I got to do, then here we go.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I did all the research all of last year. I was like, okay, so the typical school model is you go to school for a year or two and then you go get your hours, right? So the governing body of nutritionists, they've created this new model where you can take your classes and you can go to school at the same time. Okay, so there's 27 schools in the United States that offer this new model. Only two of them offer them online, right? Only one of them offered them online in an asynchronous way. So I'm speaking to one college, like, oh, this is great. It's online. They're like, yeah, but you still got to show up. I'm like, well, then I might as well be walking on the campus. That's not online. That's just ridiculous to me. Right. And so the courses are online, right? You have to do your hours in the community, right? You got to do all these things. It's like really the prerequisites for most schools is about 27 to 35 credits before you can even get in the program. I'm talking chemistry, organic chemistry, anatomy. Like, okay, so who got time? How many credits is a bachelor's degree? Like 100. Who got time for 9, 10 classes? Taking 9 or 10 classes before you can even get into the nutrition studies program. Like, shout out to everybody that did that. So I found a program. It's online. Not so many prerequisites. It's going to be a lot of hard work. I'm going to have to work full time and go to school and do my hours. It's going to be a little bit of a Hollywood shuffle. I'm going to knock it out, but I'm definitely going to be very articulate about the journey and what a challenge it is. And when by the time I get to the governing board, a nutritionist, and everybody else, it's like, this is ridiculous. It's like there's got to be a better way to bring more people into the industry that represent the people's and the people in the communities that really need it. It's got to be a better way. It
Yeah.
can't be quit your job. Please, we could go on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meanwhile,
Yeah.
I will let you know when I get accepted to the program and when classes start. And you know what my vision is? I want to open a wellness center in the Bronx. I want to do all kinds of things. I want to bring all the people that I'm meeting together under one roof. I just have a lot of dreams, and sometimes they just keep me up at night. But this one we're gonna knock out because I just cannot believe that it's so hard to do, and I cannot believe that there's so few ways to get at it. But I want to be a relevant voice in that space. And if I have to be credentialed, then yeah, you're right. That's what it is. And then we'll see what barrier come behind that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I really commend you for being willing to say the sacrifice is going to be worth it in a lot of ways because it's a step
Yeah.
towards that the life and the experience that you're working to create. And unfortunately, inside of this process, we can't skip steps in a lot of ways because regardless of it and we get the deliberateness and all of that, your life will increase and expand with the credentialing and the knowledge. There's a reason, the universe is supporting for some reason. The universe said, you know what, I need you to do this step too.
I feel the same
Yeah.
way. Oh my God. Cause like I never thought I would do anything in the food space ever. Like I have no desire. Like I don't want to be a chef or do culinary school or any of those things. But yeah, like that's how it worked when, God put it on your heart and I'm in these spaces and I'm talking to people. Even yesterday, I was like, yeah, I could see it. Yeah, go get that credentials. I was talking to somebody yesterday about research. I was talking to a group of teenagers about self-image coming based on what they seen in TikTok. Like, well, what people are eating, how is social media influencing how people are eating. So I was with a bunch of researchers yesterday and I was like, yeah, let's go LA. Hmm.
Right on. I love it. So, the Bronx being both a culturally rich area and a region facing challenges plays a significant role in your work. How do you plan to use your platform to address these contrasting aspects of the Bronx community?
Yeah, I plan to use a platform to bring people to the mic to help change the narrative. Like seriously, you have to stop saying there's no farmers markets. There's tons of farmers markets. I learned yesterday that there's over 100 urban gardens in the Bronx. Like what? I think we need to do a better job of telling our story. I mean, we have local newspapers in the Bronx, local networks like BronxNet, but I think that we just have to keep finding new ways to tell the story about the movement, that the things are really happening, that there are new restaurants, there are new people, new voices. I had no idea some of the organizations I met with yesterday, like I had no idea the number of teachers who are teaching cooking in classrooms and in New York City schools is like the mayor is plant-based. And so there's plant-based meals in hospitals now for the first time. I didn't even know like that was a thing. Like this, I didn't even know like that there was no choice for plant-based. So you could check this, that, and the other. And now like in 7 hospitals, you could check plant-based. So I just think that as a Bronx person, as an ambassador for plant-based nutrition, I just have to tell a story every day in every way in every space.
There you go.
Mhm.
So, what is one episode or conversation from your podcast that you believe every aspiring food focused podcaster or audio professional should listen to and why?
Oh man. Well, from the old podcast, I feel like going green while being black is the right one. You know, I think that black people have had an interesting relationship with food. I realize like my Rastafari friends, they've been plant-based forever. It's like there's a lot of I've read in the Wall Street Journal that black people are the fastest growing group of vegans than anybody else. So I definitely think going green while being black is a good one to listen to because it helps you find yourself. Like, where are you really in this food journey? So yeah.
All right, cool. You advise bringing one's full self to the mic. Can you elaborate on the importance of authenticity to you in podcasting, especially in the context of representing underrepresented community?
Yes, I think that you got to be yourself because everyone else is taken, right? I think that a lot of times, I mean, I worked in the music industry, I worked in the sports industry, I worked for the Knicks. I've been around a lot of talent, and there's absolutely a imposter thing that could start happening to you. Like, you could just be on your podcast, like, and welcome to the Black Girls Eat podcast. Like, it's like, that's not, thinking about how you want to sound, even like, for me to be like, welcome. I'm LA and this is the Black Girls Eat podcast. My friends would laugh me out the town, right? It's like, you don't talk like that. So I think that people are busy and the world is crowded. There are millions and millions and millions of podcasts and videos and internet. So like, if I'm gonna stop by to hear what you gotta say, it has to resonate in my ears, right? And Black Girls Eat is not for everybody, right? But there's a slice of people who want to hear what I have to say and who vibe the way I vibe, right? And I want to pay attention to those people. Like when I worked in the music industry, people had records and they'd be like, oh, but you got to take the curse words out if you want to be in Target or Walmart. And there was artists that was like, I'm not doing that. And I don't care about Target and Walmart. I mean, some of them eventually change their mind because they want to be talking at Walmart. But it is what it is. So yeah, it's important that because you can't replicate something that's scripted. So you like even now, like I'm look here the way I am most days. I didn't have false eyelashes and extra studio makeup because I can't show up like that every day. So it's important to just like show up how you show up, speak how you speak, share your content, share your journey, share your experiences. I would like to think that after someone interacted with me, they felt a little lighter. They felt a little bit more like, you know what? I'm gonna get me some fruits and vegetables today. She ain't saying nothing. I ain't scared. Rather than like, oh, that was so heavy. Oh God, what I'm gonna do? That kind of thing. So yeah, like just be who you are. And I think there's so many people on the planet. There's enough for everybody. There's no scarcity. So for whatever your vibe is, whatever your style is, find your audience and then just rock out.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I wanted you to give you an opportunity to shout out some podcasts that you enjoy and may have influenced you. So could you tell us more about the podcast Glow in the Dark with Tracy G and Girdley Cages?
Yeah, I discovered that. So we actually have the same representation. So I
Okay.
discovered their podcast, and I was like, yeah, real women, real Black women talking about the things that, like, man, I wish folks talked about when I was younger. Again, I think that podcast is another example of somebody that's not putting on a front, not putting on no airs. Like, this is what's going on today. This is how we feel about it. This is our perspective. And I think podcasting just it's wild. Like it just allows you to just open your mouth and breathe. And that's what I get every time I tune in to those girls. I mean, there are a few others, and I apologize because I don't know all their names, but that's like a category of podcasters to me that are like models for if you have something to say, get on the mic, share it, build a community, build a safe space. That's important where people feel comfortable to say, you know what? I never talked about that before, right? That's dope that you brought that up. And not always the sad stuff, but the joyful things too. I just think they do a stellar job of that and then translates over to the Instagram page with Tracy. And I think she's on Sirius Radio. I don't have Sirius, but apparently she's on with Sway in the morning or something. So she's a radio personality as well. But I just appreciate the way they vibe as sister girls, which sometimes made me think like, I wish I had a co-host. Somebody asked me, should we co-host together? And at first I was like, that would be cool. Then I realized, no, I'm Leo and I'm mad bossy. And you know what? It's my vision. And no, I don't want a partner who's going to like ask me, I don't want to interview this person or I don't think this is a good idea. And I was like, you have to be really honest with yourself. Like podcasting could be scary alone, but are you really going to be like a team player? Like, is that person going to really have a voice and a say? Or unless you could do it with like clear, like who does what. But I just feel like Black Girls Eat is just like so much of my DNA. I don't know how that would extend. But it would be fun to have guests, couple of times. I always love being on panels, groups of girls talking. I love those kinds of things, but they do a pretty good job.
That's awesome. All right, we'll shout them out for sure. So
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed this conversation. We have worked together, worked around one another, both in the New York City Department of Education and these programs to support our youth. So it's been great to talk to you about the podcast itself and to understand your mission and your movement because it's very important. And it's almost about our way forward in a lot of ways. Our health, without it, what are we doing and what do we have?
Sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And in black men, my husband, I tell people all the time, he used to be a chickenologist. Man, fried chicken every time, every chance he got. And he was a carnivore. We had meatloaf Monday, taco Tuesday. I mean, it was crazy. But 2 or 3 years ago, he was like, you know what, babe? I'm good if we don't have all that. I'll rock out with some salmon. And he's been amazing in terms of like being a black man and transforming his food choices right now. What he's doing outside, I don't know. But really, at home, it's been great to like watch him change what he's eating and think about having less meat. And the meat thing is crazy with people and heart disease. And I have family members who have heart failure and diabetes and all those kinds of things. So yeah, it's definitely, I think it's needed. I think for me, for Black Girls Eat, I'm doing what I need to do, which is relaunching the podcast, which is going to school, which is getting in spaces and having this conversation and lifting my profile. Because I feel like I've just been kind of in my kitchen and a little bit online. And 2024 is about like really getting out to say, I'm here, I'm in the food space too, and I represent a population of people that are underrepresented. And I'm here for the culture, I'm here for the taste buds, and I'm here for saving money. And I want to keep saying that in a lot of different spaces. And hopefully people are like, yeah, I'm with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's important for you to recognize, and you said it early, that it's not about you, right? There is a whole world that actually factually needs this information.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I play myself small, the more I'm closing the door on those folks who actually need this good word, right? That's a message for everyone who's out there who has something to say that is meaningful and transformational, impactful, and may not be talked about from your perspective or experience and or being talked about in general. When you decide that you're the center and you're afraid to be seen, that's a whole group of people who miss out on the message and the movement. And so again, congratulations and I'm really proud and excited for you as you move this forward.
Thank you. And I appreciate you working with the young people, showing up, coaching them, mentoring, advising. I feel like this is part of that. It's just who we are as people on the planet. Me and you and others like us, right? We just pour into people.
Hmm.
We mission driven, service oriented. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
here we are.
So here we are. There we go. So I want you to let people know how they can find you online, how they can subscribe to the newsletter and social media.
Yes. Absolutely. Please visit the Black Girls Eat website, of course. And you can find me on all socials at Black Girls Eat. Follow me on Instagram. When you get to Instagram, visit the profile so you can sign up for the newsletter. But you could also just search recipes and random ish on Substack and you can subscribe that way.
Well, I
Those,
appreciate you being here and I'm going to close us out. All right. I want to give a
yes.
big thanks to our Afros Audio and Black Podcasters Association members for supporting our commitment for community and collaboration. If you'd like to join the Black Podcasters Association, the link will be in the description. And if you want to join us at the 6th annual Afros and Audio Podcast Festival, visit afrosanaudio.com. Follow at Afros and Audio on all social media channels, and you can find me at Talib Jasir on Instagram. Thanks again, LA, for being a part of Afros and Audio's Black History Month interview series. It was a pleasure.
BX.